They hadn't remembered in a decade. And yet here they were, at my door, with a store-bought cake and a stack of unpaid bills. I was still holding the kettle when the doorbell rang. Hadn't even poured the tea. Just stood there in my robe, gray hair clipped back, waiting for the clock to tick past another quiet birthday. 65 this time. Not a milestone, not really. Just one more loop around the sun with no calls, no cards, no knock at the door. At least that's what I expected. That's what had become routine. But when I opened the door, all three of them stood there like actors in a play I hadn't agreed to watch. Martin, stiff in his over-ironed shirt. Laura, trying too hard with her lipstick and overly bright smile. And Jake, the youngest, with that charm that always made him dangerous. He was holding the cake. A sad little thing from the grocery store, plastic lid fogged up with condensation. "Happy birthday, Mom," Laura said, stepping in without waiting for me to move aside. Jake followed, cake first. Martin lingered, as if he wasn't sure how this was supposed to go. I stood there a moment longer, then closed the door behind them. "Tea's just boiled," I said, because manners don't vanish even when your children forget you for 10 years. They settled into the living room like guests at a stranger's home, careful not to knock over the old picture frames or glance too long at the shelf with their childhood crafts. Laura noticed the needlepoint pillow on the chair she used to curl up in. She didn't say anything. Martin cleared his throat. "We didn't mean to just show up like this, but we thought... It's been too long." 10 years, I said, pouring water into the mugs. "That's how long." Jake chuckled, the way he always did when things got uncomfortable. "You know how life gets. Kids, jobs, everything moving so fast." I handed them tea, sat down opposite. "So," I said, "what brings you here?" Martin blinked. "It's your birthday." "No," I said calmly. "That's the excuse. What's the reason?" Laura's smile faltered. It was Jake who broke the silence. "Okay, look. I wouldn't bring this up today if it weren't serious, but I'm in trouble. It's a business loan. Things went south, and if I don't cover the payment by Monday, they'll freeze my accounts." He pulled out a crumpled paper from his jacket. "It's not much, 30,000. I just need to cover this stretch. Then I'm back on my feet." I looked at the paper. I didn't touch it. "Why me?" I asked. He hesitated. "You're the only one who can." Martin shifted. "We've all been tight, Mom. You've always been good with money, and you sold the house in Fairgrove. We thought maybe..." Laura leaned forward. "We're not asking you to give it, just a loan. We'll sign whatever you want." I set my cup down gently. "Do you remember what kind of cake I like?" Jake blinked. "What?" "My birthday cake," I said. "The one you all used to beg me to bake. The one with the jam filling." They were silent. "It was poppy seed sponge with apricot jam. I made it every year until you were old enough to stop caring. And then you stopped calling." Laura looked down. "You didn't come last year, or the year before. You didn't ask if I needed groceries during lockdown. Not a single message when I had surgery on my knee. But today, you come with cake and contracts." Jake's voice rose. "I said it was serious, Mom." "I'm sure it is. Serious enough to remember your mother exists." The words hung heavy in the room. Laura tried again. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought maybe you didn't want the fuss. You never said anything." "I stopped saying things," I said, "after the 4th year of silence." Martin stood. "This was a mistake. Let's go." Jake didn't move. "Mom, please. I'm out of options." I looked at him. Not the man he wanted to be, but the boy who once cried over a lost toy and ran to me for comfort. I looked at all of them, and the silence between us, and I understood. They hadn't come back. they'd come to collect. I stood. "You'll have your tea. Then you'll go. And I'll think." Jake tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "You've all had 10 years to forget how to love me. I'll need a little time to remember how to trust you." That was the end of it for now. We sat in silence, sipping lukewarm tea. After they left, I washed their teacups slowly, one by one, as if rinsing away the strange layer of pretense they'd left behind. The house was quiet again. No footsteps, no voices. Just the old clock in the hallway, ticking like it always had, too loud now that the silence had settled in. I hadn't expected them, and I certainly hadn't expected the familiar tightness in my chest to come back so fast. Not grief, not quite anger either. Just that dull, familiar ache that came from knowing you've been placed on the shelf, like an heirloom someone doesn't quite want to throw out, but no longer wants to look at either. 10 years. I opened the drawer in the kitchen that I used to keep my address book in. It had long since become a storage place for everything I wasn't ready to throw out. Old receipts, birthday cards from Lucy when she was little, warranty slips for appliances I no longer owned. And tucked beneath all of it was the envelope, the one marked Family, Financial. I took it to the table and pulled out the papers inside. Check copies, bank transfer confirmations, handwritten notes where I'd added things up on the back of envelopes. 1,000 here for Jake's second business idea, 800 for Laura when their furnace broke, a down payment Martin needed just temporarily to close a deal, tuition for Lucy's school, hospital bills when Jake got appendicitis and forgot his insurance had lapsed. It was all there, all accounted for. A paper trail of someone who had always said yes. The numbers started adding up. Somewhere past 40,000, I stopped counting. Not because it wasn't worth knowing, but because suddenly I remembered my last birthday card from any of them. It had been from Laura, a printed one, unsigned. I remembered flipping it over and realizing she'd never even written my name inside. She had just handed it to Lucy to deliver. That had been the last one. Since then, just silence. Birthdays slipped by like shadows. I stopped baking the cake, stopped setting the table. I had grown used to pretending I didn't care, but I did. Of course I did. I stood up, went to the shelf near the front door, and pulled out the photo box, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were decades of moments, the 3 of them in matching sweaters on Christmas morning. Laura with a missing tooth, grinning at the camera. Martin carrying Jake on his back at the lake house. There was one of me and their father, Harry, with all of them in front of the old blue van we used to take on camping trips. I stared at our faces. The years had been good to them. They'd grown, succeeded in their own ways, moved forward, and somehow I'd stayed behind. They called when they needed something, when money was tight, when emergencies hit. But not on birthdays. Not on Mother's Day. Not on the day Harry died, though I had sat alone that whole afternoon with the curtains closed and the casserole untouched. They had not called. And today, for the first time in a decade, they did. Because Jake needed a loan. I stood at the sink, hands gripping the edge of the counter. The tea kettle still sat where I'd left it. I reached for it, moved it aside, and found something else underneath. A folded napkin, stained with tea, but with my handwriting on it. A grocery list. Flour, apricot jam, poppy seeds. I must have written it years ago. Maybe back when I still baked that cake for myself. Back when hope still looked like a cake on a table, even if no one showed up. I placed the napkin on the fridge. Then I picked up the phone. Not to call Jake. Not to call Martin or Laura. I scrolled to Lucy. She was 17 now. Taller than I remembered. Smarter, too. And kind. Always kind. The only one who ever asked how I was feeling instead of what I could offer. My fingers hovered, then typed, "Thank you for the message yesterday. It meant more than you know. How's school?" She replied within a minute. "Grandma, I was just thinking of you." "It's fine. Exams coming up. Did they show up?" I had no idea they were planning to. I looked at the message, reread it twice. Did they show up? She hadn't even known, which meant what I suspected was true. It hadn't been about my birthday. Not really. Just the loan. Just the need. "They came," I typed back. "Not for cake. Just for money." The typing bubble flickered on her end, then stopped. Then started again. "I'm so sorry." That was all she wrote, but it was enough. Because she meant it. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving and poured a glass for myself. I didn't toast. Didn't light a candle or pretend I was celebrating. I just sat there at the kitchen table with the folder of receipts in front of me and the photo box beside it. And for the first time in 10 years, I let myself feel everything. Not just sadness, but anger, regret, resentment, and underneath it all, something unexpected. Resolve. They remembered my birthday, but only because it came with a price tag. Now it was time I remembered something too. I was not a bank. I was their mother. And that used to mean something. He showed up the next morning, unannounced. I saw him through the window as I was trimming the rosemary bush near the porch. Same jacket from yesterday, creased at the elbows. Same smile he used to flash at me when he'd come home with a bad grade and wanted me to soften the blow. Jake had always been the charming one, the slippery one. Even as a little boy, he'd figured out how to get what he wanted. From his teachers, his sisters, me. "Morning, Ma," he said, coming up the steps like he still belonged here. I didn't say anything at first, just brushed the dirt from my gloves and wiped my hands on the towel slung over my shoulder. He held up a takeout bag like a peace offering. "Brought those scones you like, from that place on 5th. I raised an eyebrow. "Those closed 3 years ago." He blinked. "Oh, I meant the other place. Just as good, I promise." I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of conversations happening on the doorstep. If something ugly was coming, better to hear it on solid ground. In the kitchen, he opened the bag, set out pastries that looked oversugared and undercooked, then took his usual seat like we'd done this 100 times before. "You didn't have to come," I said, pouring tea. "I wanted to," he said, "to talk, clear the air." I sat opposite him and waited. He sighed. "Look, I know it didn't look good yesterday, us showing up out of the blue like that. I just..." He rubbed his face. "I didn't know what else to do." "That's the problem, Jake," I said quietly. "You never do, until it's too late." He leaned forward, all faux sincerity. "I'm trying, Ma, really. This time I had a solid plan. Everything was lined up. And then the supplier backed out last minute, and the payments, well, it unraveled." "What was the plan?" I asked. He blinked again. "What?" "The business plan," I said. "You want $30,000. Tell me exactly what for." He fidgeted. "It's a fulfillment service. You know, like storage and shipping for online sellers. E-commerce stuff. It's booming." "And your role?" "I'm setting up the warehouse, coordinating logistics. Got a buddy with the software." You have a lease?" "Well, we had a verbal agreement." "Contracts?" "Not yet, but revenue projections?" His shoulders tensed. Ma, it's not a lecture. I'm not asking for a loan from a bank. I'm asking you. No, Jake, I said. You're doing exactly that. But worse, you're asking for more than a loan. You're asking me to believe in you again, blindly. After how many failures? 4? 5? He opened his mouth. Closed it again. I leaned back in my chair. You're 38 years old. You've borrowed from me for every idea since you were 24. And I have not seen a single cent return. Not even a thank you card. That's not fair, he said. I've had rough patches. You know that. Divorce, market shifts, COVID. You're right, I said. All of that. But do you know what else I've had in that time, Jake? He looked at me warily. A hip replacement, 2 hospital stays, a roof that nearly collapsed in the storm 3 years ago, groceries to carry when I couldn't lift a bag, silence on my birthdays, silence when your father died, silence except when you needed something. His jaw tightened. I am not angry because you need help, I said. I am angry because help is the only reason you remember I exist. Jake looked down, then said, softer this time, I just didn't want to come to you unless I had to. That, I said, is not love. That's convenience. He exhaled hard. So you won't help. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood and walked to the drawer where I kept the folder. I placed it on the table between us. He looked at it. What's that? Every transfer, every check, every bill I've covered since you turned 21, with names, dates, notes. It's all there. He didn't touch it. You've always thought of me as Mom, the safety net, the one who never says no. But I'm done being a net, Jake. I'm a person. One who's tired of being treated like a backup plan. There was a long silence. Then, in a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, I was scared to come. Why? Because I knew I didn't deserve it, he said. And I thought, maybe if I made it look like a family visit, you'd soften. Maybe you'd think we were trying. I nodded. Thank you for being honest. He looked up, startled. But the answer is still no. He flinched, like I'd struck him. You may figure it out, I added gently. I hope you do, but not with my money. He stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. No, Jake, it's overdue. He left without finishing the tea. I stood by the window and watched him walk to his car. He didn't look back, just got in and drove off like the road owed him something. Back in the kitchen, I folded the folder closed and breathed. It felt like something had finally shifted in the air. Not anger, not sorrow. Just the quiet weight of clarity. The photo albums were stored in the hallway cabinet, stacked behind winter blankets I no longer used. I hadn't opened them in years, not since the day I packed them away after Harry's funeral. But that morning, after Jake left, I found myself reaching for them like a woman reaching for proof she hadn't imagined her life. The covers were worn, corners frayed, some pages stuck together from age or humidity. But the faces inside, they stared back at me as clear as day. Martin with his big ears and serious eyes. Laura in her ballerina phase, always twirling. Jake, wild-haired and grinning, smeared with chocolate in every other photo. And Harry, always beside me, hand at my back like a quiet anchor. I flipped page after page, watching the years unfurl. Birthdays, camping trips, the first day of school, Easter egg hunts on the lawn. 100 moments where they'd looked at me with something close to love. Had I changed that much? Had they? Or had we all just slipped into distance like warm water slowly turning cold? So slowly, you don't even notice you're freezing. I found a picture from my 40th birthday. They'd made me breakfast in bed. Burnt toast, undercooked eggs, orange juice in a wine glass. They'd spelled Mom in strawberries on a plate. Jake had drawn a card with a lopsided heart and wrote in giant, crooked letters, "You are the best cooker and the best hugger." I touched the edge of the photo. The boy in that picture would be unrecognizable to the man who stormed out of my kitchen yesterday. Or maybe not. Maybe he was still that boy, still waiting for someone to fix the mess. Underneath the albums, I found something else, something I'd nearly forgotten. An old cloth-bound notebook with a pressed flower tucked between its pages. I opened it carefully. It wasn't a journal, not exactly. More like a ledger of emotional bruises. Short entries, not dated, just fragments. Martin said he'd call after the meeting. He didn't. Laura canceled dinner again. Said the kids were too tired. Jake forgot my birthday, 3rd year in a row. I pretended not to mind. Mother's Day, no flowers, not even a text. Surgery last week, no one came. I flipped through, feeling each entry like a tiny paper cut. None deep alone. But together, 1,000 little wounds I'd never let heal. Why had I written them? To remember? To prove to myself it wasn't in my head? I think part of me knew even then that something was slipping. That one day I'd need to hold the truth in my hands, not to accuse them, not even to defend myself, but to stop doubting what I already felt in my bones. I closed the notebook and placed it beside the albums. And then I walked through the house like a stranger, touring a museum of my own life. The framed diploma from nursing school still hung crooked in the hallway. The ceramic mug Jake made in 3rd grade still held my paintbrushes. In the guest room, once Laura's, I found the old growth chart drawn in pencil on the closet wall. Tiny lines marked each birthday. 6 words, cake and balloons. 7 years, broke arm but still smiled. 8 years, Laura said I was her best friend. That wall hadn't been updated in over 20 years. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The furniture had aged with me. The walls needed repainting. The curtains were too thin for winter. But the house, this house, was mine. Not because I bought it, not because I kept the roof patched and the plumbing working, but because I filled it with warmth, with history, with love they no longer remembered, but that I had never stopped offering. And yet for 10 years, on the one day that marked my very existence, they had forgotten me. Not once, not by accident, but year after year. Deliberately or carelessly, at some point, the difference stopped mattering. This year, they remembered, but not because they missed me, because they needed something. And I'd let that be enough, again and again. I stood up and walked to my desk. In the bottom drawer was the folder Lucy made for me last Christmas. She'd called it Grandma's Important Stuff in bright purple marker. Inside were the passwords I always forgot, emergency contacts, a copy of my will, and, most importantly, a little note she'd written in her looping teenage script. If they forget again, remember, I never will. That girl. She didn't know the whole truth. But she saw me. Really saw me. And maybe that was the start of something. Not revenge, not punishment, just self-respect. I placed the photo album back in the cabinet. Kept the notebook out. I wanted to remember. Because forgetting, that's how it all had started. Her message came at 10:42 that night, just as I was brushing my teeth. Happy birthday, Grandma. Did they at least bring cake? I stared at the screen for a long moment, toothbrush still in hand. The question wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't teasing. It was the sort of question you ask when you're genuinely hoping the answer is better than what you fear. I rinsed my mouth, padded barefoot to the kitchen, and sat down before replying. Yes, grocery store cake. Dry and too sweet. But they brought it. A second later. Figures. Bet they forgot the candles. They forgot more than that, I typed. Then deleted it. Then typed again. They remembered my birthday for the first time in 10 years. But not to celebrate. They wanted money. The typing bubble flickered, then paused, then flickered again. Are you serious? I am. There was a long pause this time. I imagined Lucy lying on her bed, phone in hand, probably under the covers, probably trying not to let her mom hear her typing. Laura had always been strict about screen time, even if she never noticed when Lucy disappeared into herself. What did you say? I said I needed time to think. Do you want my opinion? I smiled. She always asked, always offered, never pushed. Go ahead. Don't give them a dime, not one. I know it's not my place, but they don't deserve it. That caught me. The bluntness of it. The clarity. At 17, I'd been afraid of everything. Lucy, though. Lucy had a spine. That's a strong statement, I wrote. Her reply came almost immediately. I've been watching them for years. They only remember people when it's useful. You're not crazy, Grandma. Just kind. I sat there in the dim kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Her words sat heavy in my lap. Not crazy, just kind. Is that what it was? All these years, I thought maybe I'd exaggerated. Maybe I expected too much. But Lucy, who saw them daily, was confirming what I'd never dared to say aloud. Thank you, sweetheart, I wrote. That means more than I can say. She replied with a little heart. Then, you should come to my play next week. I'm in the ensemble, but I get a line. I wouldn't miss it. I set the phone down and just sat there a while. The kitchen felt warmer somehow. Or maybe it was me. Lucy had always been different. She listened when no one else did, asked real questions, remembered things, like how I liked my tea or which shows I was watching, or the names of my old co-workers at the hospital. She didn't talk to me like I was furniture. She didn't pause in conversation to check her phone, and more than once she had asked me, "Are you okay, Grandma?" Not out of obligation, out of care. I stood, walked to the small desk near the back door, and opened the drawer where I kept my emergency files, bank statements, insurance policies, my will. The numbers sat there in black and white. My savings, my investments, the money I'd quietly protected since Harry passed. And next to it, tucked between folders, was an old envelope I'd never gotten around to using, addressed in my handwriting to Lucy, for college or whatever comes next. It wasn't filled yet, but I had planned to. Someday, when things calmed down, when the house didn't need repairs, when the guilt of saying no to her parents didn't feel so sharp. But now I thought, why wait? Why keep waiting for permission to do the right thing? They had forgotten my birthday for 10 years, but Lucy never had. Not once. They came this year not for joy or memory or apology, but for access. And she came with a message. Just a line, just a question. But it meant more than every cake they'd ever failed to bring. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing. Dear Mr. Franklin, I wrote to my financial advisor, I'd like to schedule a meeting this week to discuss setting up a trust account for my granddaughter, Lucy A. Caldwell. I paused, smiled, then kept writing. By the time I was done, it was past midnight. My birthday had come and gone, but it felt like something else had arrived. Not celebration, but clarity. The woman at the bank greeted me like she always did, with a smile too bright for 8 in the morning and a name tag that said, Trisha, here to help. I'd known her for years in the way you know people who handle your money, but never ask about your life. Good morning, Mrs. Briggs. Do you have an appointment? I called yesterday. I'd like to meet with Mr. Franklin about some changes to my account. Her smile faltered just slightly, as if that kind of sentence usually came from younger clients in tailored suits, not older women in sensible cardigans and quiet shoes. Of course. Let me check if he's available. 5 minutes later, I was seated in a familiar office with beige walls and framed prints of sailboats. Mr. Franklin, Matthew, was a quiet man in his 50s with calm eyes and a patient tone. He'd handled Harry's pension after he died, and later helped me put what little I had into stable investments. We weren't friends exactly, but he'd always treated me like more than a number. Mrs. Briggs, he said, folding his hands, what can I do for you today? I placed the folder on his desk. I want to discuss limiting access to my funds and setting up a trust. For my granddaughter? His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't look surprised. Of course. Is this a recent decision? I nodded, but not a sudden one. He opened the folder, scanned the pages I'd brought. I'd made copies of every transaction I could find that had gone to Martin, Laura, or Jake. Each one marked with the date, the amount, and a note. House deposit. Dental surgery. Second failed business. I'd like to make sure none of them can draw from my accounts. No power of attorney. No automatic transfers. Nothing. Matthew looked up. That's all doable. Would you like to revoke any existing permissions? Yes, immediately. He nodded and began typing. And the trust? I pulled a fresh document from the folder. This is what I want. A college trust for Lucy. Not contingent on anything. Just something that's hers. For whenever she needs it. Matthew studied the paper. You understand this means those funds won't be accessible to anyone else, including you. I understand. And you're certain? I looked at him directly. For 10 years, they forgot I existed, until they needed a check. Lucy is the only one who's remembered I was a person. He didn't argue. We went through the paperwork. It took longer than I thought. Forms, signatures, verifications. At one point, Matthew leaned back and said, It's rare to see someone this prepared. I smiled faintly. I've had a long time to think. By the time I left the bank, the sun was higher in the sky and I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but clearer. At the corner cafe, I treated myself to a muffin and tea, sat by the window and watched the street. 2 mothers were loading toddlers into car seats. A man in a suit walked by, arguing into his phone. A teenager held the door open for an elderly woman with a walker. Life was still going on, indifferent to birthdays or betrayals or overdue loans. And I was still here, in it. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. My accounts were untouched. My trust request marked processing. I clicked into the transaction history and scrolled through pages of withdrawals I'd stopped noticing. Automatic payments for Jake's old credit card, transfers to Martin for emergencies. Laura's gym fees somehow tied to my account from years ago and never removed. A soft bitterness settled in me. Not acid, just weight. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. It had all been so casual, so assumed, and I had let it happen. But not anymore. I logged out, slid the phone into my purse, and stepped back into the sunlight. Back home, I printed out confirmation of the changes and filed them neatly. The folder with Lucy's name on it was growing thicker. I added a note on the front, in case anything happens to me. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened the notebook I'd rediscovered, and added one more entry. March 17th. Closed all accounts to family. Trust set for Lucy. First day in 10 years I didn't feel like a backup plan. Then I made myself a proper lunch. Chicken salad, toasted bread, the good tea I usually saved for company that never came. I sat in the sunroom and ate slowly, with a book in my lap and no interruptions. It was the most peace I'd felt in years, and for once I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. Martin came on a Thursday. Not with cake, not with apologies, but with that same firm tone he'd developed during his years in real estate, the one that made clients feel like saying no was somehow a breach of contract. I knew he'd come eventually. They never waited long when the word money hung in the air like a scent. He arrived at noon without warning, holding a folder and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom," he said, stepping into my living room like it belonged to him. "Got a minute?" I motioned toward the chair across from mine. "Sit. I was just finishing lunch." He didn't sit. Instead, he placed the folder on the coffee table, neatly, like a lawyer serving documents. "I want to talk about Jake." "Jake can speak for himself," I said. "He's in a bad spot." "I'm aware. He didn't want me coming, but I told him it's family. We can't just let this fall apart." I raised my eyebrows. "What's falling apart, exactly?" "The business. His partner pulled out. He's leveraged up to his ears. If the payment doesn't go through, they'll seize the warehouse." "The one he doesn't have a lease for?" Martin blinked. "He told you?" "He tried." Martin sighed, rubbed his temple like I was the one being difficult. "Look, I know he's made mistakes, but it's not just about him. If he defaults, the damage spreads. His name, our name, it affects everything. The bank sees the Briggs name attached to a failed venture, and suddenly my loans get harder. Laura's husband is applying for a grant. This kind of thing echoes." "Echoes," I repeated. He nodded. "Exactly." I sat back. "So you're not here because Jake's in trouble. You're here because you're afraid of the splash." He didn't answer. "Do you know how many loans I've covered over the years?" I asked. He shifted. "That's not what this is." 43, I said. I counted. Between the three of you. 43 requests for help. Some big, some small. Most of them never paid back. Martin opened his mouth. Closed it. I leaned forward, hands folded. "You forgot my birthday for a decade. Then you show up when your brother needs saving. You want me to believe this is about loyalty?" "This isn't fair," he snapped. "We've all been busy. Life happens. You know that." "No, Martin. Life doesn't happen. Choices do." He stared at me, that flicker of annoyance behind his carefully polite expression. "So this is it? You're going to punish all of us for missing a few birthdays?" I stood. "This isn't punishment. This is boundary." He scoffed. "Right. Now you're drawing lines." "Yes," I said. "Finally." He looked around the room, eyes scanning the furniture, the pictures, the shelves, like he was seeing it for the first time. Then he pointed at the folder. "That's a proposal," he said. "If you change your mind. Terms are outlined. It's legal. Jake will pay interest." I didn't touch it. He straightened his tie. "I told Laura you'd be reasonable. I said, she's not like Dad. She understands what it means to keep a family together." My mouth twitched. "That's funny. Your father understood exactly what that meant. He just thought it included respect." Martin flushed. "Mom, goodbye, Martin." He hesitated. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. I've made a lot of mistakes. This isn't one of them." He didn't slam the door when he left. He wasn't that kind of man. But the quiet click of it shutting behind him was louder than anything he could have shouted. I picked up the folder he'd left behind and carried it to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea. Then, without even opening the cover, I dropped it into the bin under the sink. Some things didn't need reading. Some things were better off finally discarded. The lawyer's office hadn't changed in 30 years. Same scratched mahogany desk, same ticking wall clock 2 minutes slow, same scent of dry paper and faint lemon polish. The only thing different was that this time, I was here alone. No Harry beside me, no joint account talk, no will revisions after the children were born, just me now. "Mrs. Briggs," said Mr. Whitaker, standing to greet me. "Always a pleasure." He was older, like me, slower in his movements, but the eyes behind the glasses were as sharp as ever. He motioned for me to sit, and I placed the envelope on his desk. "I'd like to update my will," I said, "and make some legal changes, protective ones." He nodded, adjusting his glasses. "What sort of protections are we talking about?" I pulled out the paperwork from the bank, proof of the trust, the list of revoked permissions, a draft letter I'd written with Lucy's name on it. "I want my assets shielded from my children, permanently. They're not to be notified. They're not to be given access to anything unless I explicitly choose. And I want my granddaughter, Lucy, named as beneficiary to everything that's not tied up in the trust." Mr. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant change." "It's an overdue one." He nodded slowly. "Tell me what happened." And so I told him. Not every detail, but enough. The birthday, the loan, the years of absence, the 43 transfers, the silence that only ever broke when someone needed something. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he simply leaned back and said, "You're not the first mother I've met who needed to protect herself from her children." That surprised me. "We assume motherhood is a guarantee," he went on. "But what it really is, what it should be, is an agreement. Mutual, like any partnership. And when one party stops honoring it, the other has to make decisions." He pulled out a fresh folder. "Let's start with the will." We spent the next hour reviewing documents, rewriting sections, updating designations. I signed slowly, carefully, like each signature was a key turning in a lock I had left rusted for too long. "And the trust for your granddaughter," he said. "Do you want her to know now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her be 17. Let her enjoy being loved for nothing more than who she is. I'll leave a letter. You can deliver it when the time comes." "Understood." He typed something into his computer, then looked up again. "Mrs. Briggs, if I may say, what you're doing isn't harsh. It's honest. It's protection. You're preserving your dignity and your legacy." I smiled softly. "Thank you." As I left his office, papers in hand, the air outside felt lighter somehow. The sun was low, casting a warm glow across the street. I stood there for a moment, watching people walk past. Young couples, office workers, an old man with a cane and a dog that looked too big for him. And I felt steady. Not triumphant, not vindicated. Just steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to take care of me. I had done it myself. Lucy showed up 3 days later, unannounced, holding a bouquet of slightly wilted daisies and a small paper bag with lemon muffins. "I know it's late," she said, stepping onto the porch. "But I didn't want to just text again." I smiled, stepping aside. "You're always welcome, sweetheart. Come in." She walked into the house like she had when she was 8 years old, when she used to pretend the hallway was a royal corridor and my living room her palace. Back then, she'd twirl in front of the mirror, wearing my old scarves as capes. Now she just stood there, taller than me, more serious, eyes sharper than any teenager had a right to be. "You didn't have to bring anything," I said, taking the muffins. "I wanted to," she shrugged. "Mom said you were busy, that you've been acting, I don't know, different." I gave her a sideways look. "Did she say why?" Lucy rolled her eyes. "Only that you've been thinking too much lately and might need space." I poured tea. "I think she's scared," Lucy added. "They all are. No one's saying anything, but I can tell. Dad keeps asking if I've talked to you. Martin called twice. Even Jake left a voicemail. I imagine they're wondering what I'm planning." Lucy gave me a long look. "You are planning something." It wasn't a question. I set the teacups down. "I'm protecting something. There's a difference." She nodded, but her brows pinched. "Is it about the money?" "Partly, but not in the way they think." She sipped her tea. "They're used to you being, well, safe, predictable, generous." I smiled faintly. "They've mistaken kindness for weakness." Lucy hesitated, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Can I ask something? And you don't have to answer." "Always." "Why now?" she said quietly. "After all these years, why draw the line now?" The question settled between us. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the freckles she'd inherited from me. At the stubborn chin she got from her grandfather. At the worry that didn't belong on a 17-year-old's face. "Because something in me snapped," I said. "Not like a rubber band. Not loud. Just finally broke." She waited. "I sat alone on 10 birthdays. I forgave them 10 times. I made peace with silence, told myself it wasn't personal. But this year, they came. Not for love, not to make amends. They came for money. And that told me everything I needed to know." Lucy looked down at her tea, then back up. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "Don't be," I said. "You were the only one who remembered, the only one who didn't come with conditions." She blinked hard, once. "I don't want anything from you. Just more time." I reached for her hand across the table. "And you'll have it. As long as I'm breathing, Lucy, you'll never wonder where you stand with me." She smiled, but it was wobbly. "You're not going to tell me what you've done, are you?" "No, not yet." "Will I like it?" "I hope so." We sat there for a while, eating lemon muffins, watching the light change through the window. She told me about school, about the teacher who gave too much homework, and the girl in her drama class who always stole the best lines. I listened, the way I always had. But now, I was listening, not as someone desperate to be needed, but as someone finally choosing who to give herself to. And I had chosen her. Lucy called the next evening. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was afraid to startle something fragile. "Grandma," she said, "I know you told me not to get involved, but they had dinner last night." I paused, tea halfway to my lips. "All of them," she continued. "Martin, Laura, Dad. Even Aunt Sheila came, at Uncle Martin's house. I wasn't invited, but I heard them talking after. I was walking past Mom's room. She didn't close the door." I set the cup down. "They were talking about you," she said, "and the trust." My breath caught. "What trust?" "That's the thing. They don't know what it is. Just that you've been making changes, that you went to the bank, that Mr. Whitaker called someone about an updated will. Of course. A whisper somewhere, a loose end, a receptionist who said too much. The details didn't matter. The scent of independence had reached them, and that was enough. Lucy went on. Mom said you've been unusual lately, that you're hoarding decisions. Aunt Sheila said maybe you were getting confused. I laughed, sharp and short. Confused? She said maybe it's time they talk to someone, like, legally, about power of attorney. In case you were making irrational decisions. My hand clenched around the edge of the table. They think you're hiding something, Grandma, and they don't like not being in control. I exhaled slowly. Thank you for telling me. I didn't know if I should, but it felt wrong, hearing them talk like that, like you were some old puzzle they needed to solve, like you couldn't possibly be acting on purpose. Oh, I'm acting on purpose, I said, quieter now. That much I can promise. There was a pause, then, are you okay? I am. Another pause. Are you angry? Yes, I said, but not at you, not even at them, really. Just at what we've allowed to grow between us. Lucy hesitated again. I know it's not my place, but if they try to challenge anything, if they try to make it look like you're not thinking clearly, I'll speak up. I'll tell whoever needs to hear it. I closed my eyes. You shouldn't have to, darling. Maybe not, but I will. I heard the same tone in her voice that Harry used to have when someone crossed a line in front of his family. Measured, steady, immovable. You sound older than 17, I said. I feel older. I wish you didn't have to. She exhaled. Do you think they'll really try something? I think they'll try everything except apology. And I believed it. The moment I stopped being available, I became a threat. The moment I protected what was mine, I became suspicious. They had gotten used to my open doors, my quiet forgiveness, my name on forms they never read. And now, faced with a locked gate, they were circling like it was their birthright to hold the key. We ended the call gently, and I sat alone for a long time, not angry, not anymore, but crystal clear. They hadn't gathered to reconnect. They'd gathered to strategize. And while they plotted ways to get around my decisions, I was already 10 steps ahead. This wasn't spite. This was survival. The letter took me 3 days to write, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I had too much. And for once, I didn't want to say it in anger. I sat at the dining table in the late afternoons, pen in hand, the house quiet, but not empty. There was something alive in the silence now. Not loneliness, just presence. My own. When I finally finished, I didn't seal the envelope. I never intended to send it. I wrote it for me, to let the words live somewhere other than inside my chest. To Martin, Laura, and Jake, you were not raised by a silent woman. You were not raised by a passive one. I carried all 3 of you in my arms and on my back and in my hopes. I stitched your costumes, kissed your fevers, stood in school hallways during parent conferences with the same steady face I used to comfort you through storms. I ran night shifts in the ER and still made it to breakfast before school. I was tired for years, and none of you knew, because I never let it show. I did not raise you with guilt. I raised you with every ounce of love I had. So what happened? You drifted. That's natural. You built lives, families. Priorities shifted. I understand that. But what I don't understand, and will no longer accept, is how easily I became invisible to you. You stopped calling, not just once, not just when life was hectic, year after year, and I let it slide. Because mothers always hope, because we're taught to excuse, to wait, to keep the porch light on. I told myself it wasn't personal, that you were busy, that I didn't need a cake or a card to feel remembered. But I did. I needed it more than I admitted. 10 birthdays passed. I baked myself a cake once, sat at a table with 2 place settings out of habit, then put one away. Each year I hoped. Each year I grieved in silence. And this year, you came. Not with stories, not with memories. You came with a request. Jake, you needed a loan. Martin, you backed the urgency. Laura, you brought the cake as if it might sweeten the transaction. You stood in my home and treated my milestone not as something to celebrate, but as a convenient excuse to discuss debt. I watched the way you shifted when I hesitated, the way your voices tightened, the way affection turned to pressure. You didn't come to honor me. You came to harvest. And something in me broke. Not the soft, tearful kind of break, the clean kind, the final kind. So I looked back. I counted every dollar given, every holiday missed, every time you needed me and I showed up. And I saw it clearly. I had given everything and asked for nothing. And in return, you gave me absence. You see, children aren't entitled to their parents' sacrifices, but they are responsible for how they treat the people who made them possible. I am no longer your safety net. I am no longer a fallback plan. I am your mother, a woman with a name, a past, and a future not owed to your convenience. From this point forward, my decisions will reflect that. You may call this betrayal. You may call it ungrateful. You may even try to intervene legally, spinning a narrative about confusion or age. But know this: there is nothing unclear about me now. I am more myself than I've been in decades. And while I love you, as I always will, I will no longer fund the version of you that forgets who I am when you don't need something. You are grown. And now, so am I. Eleanor. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer beside my will. Not as ammunition, but as testimony, in case they ever asked, in case one of them someday wanted to understand. I didn't send it because I wasn't writing for them. I was writing for the woman who had once believed that silence was noble, that self-erasure was love. Not anymore. My name is Eleanor, and I remember everything now. The trust was finalized on a Wednesday morning. Mr. Whitaker called to confirm everything had cleared. The account was sealed, protected, and designated solely for Lucy. No co-signers, no transfers, no claims from anyone but her. "It's done," he said. "No one can touch it but her, not even with pressure." I thanked him, hung up the phone, and sat still for a long while. It hadn't felt like revenge. Not once. What it felt like was air, fresh and clean after a long, stale winter. What it felt like was dignity, returned in quiet pieces. No announcement, no spectacle, just freedom. I took the folder labeled Lucy Trust and placed it in the fireproof box beneath the bed, alongside the letter to her. Shorter than the one to her parents, gentler. It said, "To Lucy, you never asked for anything but time and truth. This trust is not a reward. It's not leverage. It's simply something I want you to have, not because you need it, but because I see you. I see the way you listen, the way you watch, the way you notice things others pretend not to. I've lived a long life, but it took me 65 years to stop apologizing for wanting to be treated like I matter. I hope you never wait that long. This gift is for your future, however you define it. I will never use it to control you. You owe me nothing in return, except maybe one promise. Remember who you are, even when others forget who they taught you to be. With all my love, Grandma. I read the letter twice, then once more. Then I folded it, sealed it, and slid it back into the envelope. Not for now, for later. When she'd need it most, whether she knew it yet or not. That afternoon, I walked to the garden, trimmed the hydrangeas, and deadheaded the roses. The sky was heavy with the promise of spring rain, and the wind had that soft, warm smell that reminded me of childhood, of open windows and cool sheets and bare feet on porch steps. Harry would have liked this part. He always said peace was best when it was quiet. Not a firework, but a flicker. Not a bang, but a breath. I think he'd be proud, not just of the papers filed or the account opened, but of the quiet refusal I had finally made, to be taken for granted, to be erased, to live out my days as a background figure in a story I helped write. Later that evening, I received a message from Mr. Whitaker's assistant confirming Lucy's welcome letter was mailed and scheduled to arrive within 10 business days. She wouldn't know what was inside. Not yet. Only that it was from me, and that it mattered. I liked that. A quiet surprise, like the way Lucy had always appeared at my door, not with demands but with daisy bouquets and stories about her day. I baked a poppy seed cake that night, the old recipe, jam in the middle, powdered sugar on top, and I set one plate. Not because no one else was invited, but because I was finally enough. I expected the call eventually. I just didn't expect it to come from Laura. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice a little too bright, like sunshine behind dirty glass. "Do you have a moment?" I was sitting on the porch, tea cooling beside me, a blanket across my knees. The clouds had been threatening rain all morning, but hadn't followed through. I could smell it, though, close and heavy, like a decision waiting to be made. "I have a moment," I said. She hesitated. "I've been thinking about your birthday." "Oh?" "I feel bad," she said. "We all do. We didn't handle it the right way." I waited. "I just thought maybe we could start over. All of us, clean slate." There it was, the sound of shame dressed up as diplomacy. A fresh coat of paint over a cracked wall. "Did Jake put you up to this?" "No," she said quickly. "Well, not directly. But he's in a really rough place, Martin too. They're both struggling more than they're letting on." "And you?" She paused. "I've had better years." I sipped my tea, lukewarm now. "I know we haven't been present," she went on. "But you weren't either, not really. You didn't ask for anything. You always seemed so self-contained." "I was tired of asking," I said quietly. "Of reminding you that I was still here." There was a long silence. On her end, I imagined her pacing, maybe in the kitchen, phone wedged between her shoulder and cheek. She'd never liked confrontation, always made her twitchy. "I think we all made mistakes," she said, "but I don't want to lose you, and I don't want Lucy caught in the middle." Ah, there it was, the real reason. "Did she tell you?" I asked. There was a beat. Then, "Tell me what?" "That we spoke, that I know about your dinner, the conversation about legal steps, about me." She didn't answer right away. Then, "She mentioned something, briefly." "She's loyal," I said. "You should be proud." "I am," she whispered. I wish she didn't always have to pick sides." "She doesn't," I said. "You already did that for her." Another pause. I could hear her swallow. "Is it true? What they're saying? About changes you've made?" "Yes." "To your will?" "Yes." "To the accounts?" "Yes." "To Lucy?" I didn't answer that one. She sighed. "Mom, why her?" Because she sees me, I said. Not just when she needs something, not just when it's convenient. But always. I see you. No, Laura, I said gently. You see the version of me that's useful. The one who says yes. The one who quietly bails everyone out. That's the one you visit. That's not fair. It's not meant to be fair. It's meant to be honest. She was crying now, not loudly. But I could hear the breath catch, the way it used to when she was small and didn't want me to know she was scared. I'm not trying to take anything from you, I said. But I am no longer giving to people who only knock when they need the door open. I don't want your money. I believe you, I said, but the others do. And Lucy. Lucy doesn't want it either. That's why she deserves it. There was a long, ragged silence. Then she whispered, I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said. You can only choose what comes next. The line stayed open for a while. Two women on either end of a stretched-out grief, shaped like years of missed birthdays and empty holidays and tired assumptions. I do love you, she said finally. I know, I said. But love, Laura, it's not just a word you say into the phone. The house was quieter than usual the next morning, though nothing had changed. The clock still ticked too loudly in the hallway. The kettle still whistled slightly before boiling. The floor near the back door still creaked, even though I'd fixed it twice. But something in the silence had shifted. Maybe because I'd spoken the truth out loud. Maybe because it had finally been heard, even if not accepted. I sat in the sunroom with my second cup of tea, the paper unopened beside me, when a car pulled into the driveway. Not Lucy's, not Laura's. A white sedan, new, expensive. Jake's, probably borrowed. It was Martin. He stepped out of the car in his usual pressed slacks and button-down shirt, like he couldn't even visit his mother without dressing for negotiation. He carried nothing but his phone. No folder this time. No script. I stayed seated. If he was here for a performance, he'd have to find his own stage. He knocked once, then let himself in. Mom? In the sunroom, I called. He walked in, slower than usual. His face was drawn, the way it used to look when he didn't win a listing. He stood in the doorway for a second before sitting across from me. I wanted to talk, he said. I assumed that. He looked down at his hands. No coffee, no apology cake. Just silence. I let it stretch. Let him feel the thing he usually filled with charm. I talked to Laura, he said. She told me you've made some changes. I have? To your will? Yes. To your accounts? Yes. To Lucy? I said nothing. He cleared his throat. They're all upset. I'm sure. They think you've been influenced. By whom? He paused. Lucy. That made me smile. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly predictable. She didn't ask for anything, I said. She never has. But she benefits. So did you, I said. For years. He shifted. It's just, it doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel fair, you mean? He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to read something on my face that didn't match what he'd told himself for years. You always gave, he said quietly. All of us. Everything. And now it feels like you've just stopped. I met his gaze. Because I have. Why? Because I finally realized I was giving to ghosts, I said. To children who didn't remember I was still living. Who only knocked when their own lives fell apart. He didn't deny it. That's what caught me. He just looked away, jaw tight. Do you know, I continued, how many times I picked up the phone and put it back down before calling you? How many holidays I stared at the door hoping someone would walk through it? How many hospital visits I faced alone. He said nothing. You didn't forget me, Martin. That's the truth that hurts. You didn't forget. You just deprioritized. He flinched, barely. That's not how we meant it. But it's what you did. We sat in silence again. Then he asked, Is there anything we can do to change your mind? No, I said gently. He swallowed. So it's final. Yes. And the trust? That's between me and Lucy. He nodded slowly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You just have to decide who you want to be from here forward. He stood then, slowly, like a man older than his age. Before he left, he turned back. You were a good mother. I still am, I said. Just not the kind you're used to. And then he was gone. I sat there long after, the tea gone cold, the silence no longer heavy but firm, like something that had settled into place, like a boundary drawn in soil, not anger. It was not forgiveness, but it was peace. Lucy's letter arrived 2 weeks later, handwritten. No email, no text, no message through someone else. Just an envelope with her name in the corner and the familiar curve of her Y in grandma across the front. I opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. My hands were steady. Inside was a single page. No preamble, no apology. Just this. Dear Grandma, I got your letter. I cried when I read it. Not because of the trust, though that was more than I can put into words, but because I felt seen. Really seen. Like someone had been paying attention all this time. I kept thinking about what you wrote, that I never asked for anything. But the truth is, you've given me everything. Time, safety, a space where I could say things that felt too small or too strange for the rest of the world. You always asked how I was doing and meant it. You never made me feel like I was too much, or not enough. And now you've given me this future, this open door. And I don't know how to thank you except to say this. I will never forget who you are. Even when the others try to rewrite the story. Even when time makes it easier to pretend we were always close, always kind. I will remember the quiet ways you showed up, and I'll carry that with me, forever. Love, Lucy P.S. The play went well. You would have loved the costumes. I saved you the program. I read it twice. Then I placed it in the drawer next to the others. The old photos, the notebook, the letters I never sent. And I breathed. It was raining outside, soft and slow. The kind of rain that didn't rush anything. The kind that sinks into the roots, not just the surface. I made myself a cup of tea, the real kind, with the loose leaves I only brought out on good days. Sat by the window and watched the garden soak it all in, and I thought, they will tell this story one day. Not now, not soon, but eventually. They will sit in someone's living room, maybe at a holiday, maybe at a wake, and someone will ask, "What happened with your mother?" And they will pause. Because to tell the truth would mean saying, "We used her until she said no." And I don't think they'll be able to say that. So they'll change the details. Say I was distant. Say I pulled away. Say I grew cold in my final years, that they tried and tried but couldn't reach me. And maybe people will believe them. But Lucy won't. She'll remember the garden, the lemon muffins, the way I said her name with softness, the sound of the tea kettle, the envelope with her name on it. She'll remember that I did not grow cold, I grew clear. That I did not push away, I drew a line. That I did not punish, I protected. And maybe, someday, she'll sit across from someone she loves, someone who's been quietly shrinking for years, and she'll tell them, You don't have to give yourself away to stay loved. And maybe that will change something. Maybe that will be enough. I didn't live a perfect life. I made mistakes. I forgave too quickly, stayed silent too long, gave too much without asking for anything back. But I ended it with my name intact, my voice clear, and something left, not just taken. If you're reading this now, if you've followed this far, maybe it's because you've known something similar. Maybe you've been the one forgotten, the one who gave without being seen. So let me tell you, you are not wrong for wanting more. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not unkind for refusing to disappear. Sometimes love means stepping back into your own skin and saying, "This is mine, and you don't get to use it anymore. And if no one else remembers that about you, let me be the one who does." From a quiet house with a full heart, Eleanor. If this story meant something to you, if you saw yourself in it, don't scroll past. Leave a comment. Share your truth, because someone else might need to hear it too.